Do you know that you can successfully keep ducks in urban and suburban spaces? If raising ducks is your dream, our guest today is here to show you that it's possible. In this episode, editor Jessica Mitchell chats with fellow podcast team member Kenny Coogan, who spent years raising backyard ducks. We'll be learning about the benefits ducks bring, equipment to have on hand, and things to consider when raising them in towns, cities, or suburbs. This is Mother Earth News. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, Brinsea. That's BRINSEA, Chick Incubation Specialists. They've been focusing on egg incubator design continuously since 1976, resulting in a wide range of egg incubators, chick brooders, and incubation accessories. They offer unparalleled practicality, reliability, superior hatch rates, and healthy chicks. Innovation you can trust.
Good day, everyone, and we appreciate you for joining us on another exciting Mother Earth News and Friends episode. I'm Jessica Mitchell, and joining me today is fellow podcast team member Kenny Coogan. At Mother Earth News for 50 years and counting, we've been dedicated to conserving our planet's natural resources while helping you conserve your financial resources. And today we're going to learn about keeping backyard ducks in urban and suburban spaces. In addition to being a podcast team member, Kenny has been keeping backyard ducks for years, and he's here today to share his expertise. He's also a food, farm, and flower columnist. He leads workshops on all kinds of sustainability and homesteading topics, and he's the owner of a carnivorous plant nursery. So I'll say welcome to the podcast, Kenny, and welcome to being on the other side of the podcast, Kenny.
Oh, it's so exciting. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of
and
course.
I also might have pushed you into having me on.
It really didn't take that much arm twisting at all. Well, we're so glad you're here, and I can't wait to hear just your wealth of expertise on this topic. So before we jump in, is there anything else you wanted to share about who you are and what you do before we get into today's topic?
I recently published my third book, which is called Florida's Carnivorous Plants. And when I was interviewing some people about that book, I interviewed the person in North America who keeps winning like the best Venus flytrap. She has the biggest. And I asked her what her secret was. And she told me that it was that she grows them above the garbage cans where she puts her dog waste. So then I said, oh, well, I have ducks and chickens. And that is where I will be relocating my carnivorous plants to.
That is perfect. I love that.
and I have a small chicken flock. And then I'm currently raising runner and pekin ducks as a hobby and egg source within the city limits of Tampa.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to learn more about this. So you touched just a little bit on your experiences with raising ducks, but can you tell us a little bit more about that? Maybe how you even got started into raising backyard ducks?
I think I was in 4th or 5th grade and I went to the local fair and we just fell in love with all the ducks on the exhibit row. And we took some business cards. And then I do know for a fact that for my 5th grade graduation, we upgraded from, goldfish and cats to my first poultry, which were 3 English call ducks, which are very tiny little bantam ducks. And they were perfect for my backyard in Niagara Falls, New York. And for enrichment or, just something to watch them, we would go to the local pet store every Saturday and I would buy 1,000 feeder goldfish for like under $10.
Wow.
And they had all these we only had 3 ducks and we had all these little kiddie pools and I would kind of separate all these little feeder fish. And within 3 minutes or less, the water would just have little scales floating around. And this just fascinated me so much. And we would go to the pet store multiple Saturdays a month. And then the fish keeper, Angela, she, after maybe 2 months, she goes, what are you feeding? Because people who, are buying it for other fish or turtles come way less frequently. So we told her that we were feeding them to our pet ducks. And she said, I have another customer who also comes, on a weekly, biweekly basis for fish for his ducks. And this other customer who I never met, he gifted me the Stories Guide to Raising Ducks by Dave Holderreed through Angela. So one week I went to go pick up my fish and she said, hey, a customer left this, brand new book for you. And I still have that book whose spine is broken and the pages are crispy from spills and heavy references. So I still have that book after 22 years.
Wow. I love how this has been such like a huge part of your life, just growing up and growing and changing with these backyard ducks. That's so cool.
As a middle schooler, I had my business cards. I printed, 100 business cards, and on my motto or my slogan was like, look what three little ducklings started. Because between 5th grade and college, I had about 400 birds, ducks, chickens, pigeons. And during that time, I had raised, in addition to the cull ducks, Australian spotted ducks, magpies, runners, anconas, crested, Dutch hookbills, silky, and silver appleyards.
You had like a full-blown operation. I think I had one fish in 4th grade. Well, this is going to be perfect for our topic today, because we're really going to be talking about how can people get into raising ducks, especially when they live in urban and suburban spaces, and maybe they don't even realize that they can do something like this. So to really kick off the discussion today, I would love to ask first, why would someone want to keep ducks, especially if they live in the city or the suburbs or small towns? And what are the types of things that they could provide for the people who are raising them?
Well, just like the chicken love affair, people love ducks. Ducks are cute. They have those cute little cheeks. They're fluffy. They're a little more shy than a chicken. So once you befriend a duck, you really feel you have this connection. They're easy to raise. They're resistant to wet areas, unlike chickens. And they're also really good for cold and extreme hot weather. They're also easier to yard in or to keep in your suburban, urban backyard. They usually just need like a 2 to 3 foot high fence compared to a chicken where you might have to trim their wings, or you might have to have like a 6-foot fence. And they're great at eating insects like snails and slugs. For Backyard Poultry Magazine, when I went to South Africa many years ago, I purposely visited a vineyard that was utilizing 1,500 runner ducks and 100 geese as to limit their pesticide use. So they were having the ducks and the geese kind of rotate through the vineyards. So you can see that article in Backyard Poultry Magazine. And then just seeing 1,500 runner ducks, which look like bowling pins, they're so upright, they're marching. They're just so comical. And if you could have a couple in your backyard, I think that would bring you a lot of joy. And just like chickens, ducks are great at eating kitchen scraps and waste. Their manure is similar to chickens. They're just so entertaining. And to be honest, I once these chickens are gone, once they naturally leave my farm, I just want to have ducks.
Yeah, I can see how ducks, like, they have such a great entertainment factor, and they're so fun to watch and explore.
And I guess I skipped this part. The reason why I want to wean out the chickens and only keep the ducks is because both are free range on about a half an acre, which is permaculture. So I have fruit trees and shrubs and edible things. And the ducks are so gentle on the landscape. They're not creating those craters that you can twist an ankle in. They're just like gently dabbing in the mulch. And yeah, they're just so much fun.
Right. Yeah. No big pits for dust baths and stuff like chickens do.
Yeah.
So what makes ducks a good pairing specifically with an urban or suburban living situation?
So their fencing or their coop requirements are kind of similar to a chicken, but the fence pie could be lower. And then their quacking is tolerated more than a crowing rooster. So if you have males and females of the ducks, you're good to go. Muscovies which are kind of different from all other domesticated ducks. They're almost silent, and a lot of people raise them for meat and eggs. And then call ducks, which is what I started with, and then pecans, which are those big, beautiful white ducks, are the most talkative. But even, when they're talking, gently quacking, your neighbors will probably think it's scenic compared to
Yeah.
a rooster crowing. And just like how there's lots of different breeds of chickens for different purposes, there's lots of different breeds of ducks. And there's lightweight ducks and also bantam ducks that are good for smaller spaces. Like the Muscovy, even though that's a very large, heavy duck, and also pecans, both of those are great for small spaces. But you could also choose smaller breeds like call ducks, East Indies, or Australian spotted if you're limited on space.
Okay. Now, and I know we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I thought maybe I could prompt this question first while we're in this topic. I think maybe one of the reasons someone who doesn't know too much about ducks would be a little hesitant to raise them is because I think sometimes for people who don't know ducks, there's this idea that all ducks need a big pond or lake or something like that to be available to them. What would you say to someone who feels like, oh, I don't have that type of area for ducks, so I can't raise them?
They need water to eat. So when you're giving them like the dry crumbles or the pellets, they do need fresh source of water to eat, but that shouldn't be different than your other livestock or poultry. And they do not need to live on a pond or a lake. They usually do need something like a kiddie pool or larger to breed, but just like day-to-day operations, you do not need to provide them a large source of water. A bucket of water or just a water bowl is good enough for the day-to-day operations. So for me, I have an acre, but the poultry have a half an acre to free range. And then in Florida, from maybe June through September, it's the rainy season. And during the rainy season, they get a 15 by 30 foot pond that's maybe a foot or a foot and a half deep, just because it's naturally raining all the time. And then this low area fills up, and they do love it. The pond's a foot and a half deep, and the ducks are like 18 inches tall, but they'll be diving underneath it, and they'll be swimming, and they'll be splashing, and they'll have so much fun. But the other rest of the year, I'll give them literally like a kiddie pool, and they're equally happy with that because most of the time they're just walking around foraging for earthworms.
Yeah. I had this flash of a memory as you were talking about this. I've never raised ducks before, but the closest I've ever been to was when I was probably like 6 or 7. We were living in this one house, and we didn't have like a pool or anything, but we had this yard, and there were these big evergreen trees in the back of the yard. And one day these 3 ducks, like wild ducks, just showed up and just decided to hang around for a while. And I remember sometimes it would be rainy and those ducks would be out, and sometimes they'd be out by the evergreen trees, or sometimes they'd be like right on our stoop on the back porch. And we just thought it was so funny, like how they just kind of camped out there for a little bit, and how much they seemed to enjoy the rain too, like when it was raining. And I remember we named them Huey, Dewey, and Louie when they were around. They only stuck around for a few days, but they were very entertaining just to wake up, be like, oh, where are the ducks?
When I was giving you the long list of duck breeds that I raised as a middle schooler and high schooler, more recently I was raising some Cayuga ducks, which are like these beautiful black ducks. And when I had my ephemeral pond, some wild mallards visited, and pretty much all domestic ducks are descendants from mallards, except for the Muscovy. And these wild mallards came and they bred with my Cayuga, and then we let her incubate and raise those eggs. And then they were half Cayuga, half mallard.
Wow. That must have been interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if they're show worthy, but they were fun.
They were fun. All right. Well, let's say someone does want to get started into raising backyard ducks. In your experience, as we know, sometimes depending on where you live, there might be some rules to follow concerning what types of pets or small livestock you can have in your yard. So in your experience, do most towns and cities have allowances for ducks, or is it kind of a mixed bag across the country?
Yeah, right now it's kind of a mixed bag, and people don't even know how to classify if the ducks are
Mm.
livestock or poultry. So you do have to do a little bit of research. A lot of times they're not even mentioned in bills or laws. So if you have friendly neighbors, you might be good to go.
So they could be classified as like an under the radar pet if it's not even specified. What was it like in Florida? Was it pretty clear when you started having ducks down there what you could do, or was it kind of that same thing where, it wasn't really specified in the state and so it just was kind of a touch and go thing to experiment with?
It wasn't specified in my city, but when I moved into this current house, the backyard neighbor already had like 8 chickens, a rooster, and a Toulouse goose. And because geese are much louder than ducks, I knew that the other neighbors would not notice if I added a handful of ducks. So I was
Yeah.
not concerned.
Have you heard of any examples of people if of people even just trying to change any sort or specify any sort of rules in their town, or getting into a situation where they would have to kind of explain that ducks would be fine to have as a backyard pet?
I do know of another person who's also in the city limits, but they're in a smaller
Mhm.
suburb urban area, and they were raising some ducks. And because all of their neighbors were okay with it, they never felt the need to go to the city council and argue one way or the other. So, and in Tampa, you are allowed to raise backyard chickens. So I think that already gives the
Mhm.
neighbors like an idea of, all right, well, if we are going to argue, the city commission's probably gonna go in favor of the people with the ducks because they've already have been so lenient with the backyard chickens.
Mhm. Got
Are you
it.
are you have you heard of anyone having to argue for in favor of ducks?
Not argue, but I do, I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and I feel like I don't know the specifications for like poultry and stuff in town, but I do hear of just people just trying to make it work in their backyards. I think there are allowances because I see so many people with chickens in town, but I don't see as many people with ducks. I see people with quail, chickens. There's someone who has almost like a tiny little farmstead property, like 3 blocks from downtown, and they have little ponies and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a lot of people just trying to make it work in their backyards and just be like making connections with the neighbors and just making sure everything's cool. But I'm assuming if someone could have a little pony in town, the ducks would probably be okay.
Every Monday I go to the post office and I ship out plants,
Mhm.
and the cashier, she's always surprised that they survive during the shipping process. And then she goes, well, somebody also comes every Monday and ships out live quail. So I
Wow.
guess obviously the post office has been shipping chickens for like over a
Yeah.
hundred years. But I guess somewhere in the city of Tampa, somebody is breeding quail and shipping them around.
I love that.
So people love their backyard poultry, including me.
They do. Well, we talked a little bit about how you can kind of choose the breed that works best for you. So, can you give a few more examples of maybe how someone can determine what type of duck would be best for their situation? And also, if there's any sort of an idea of how many ducks are ideal to have just for the well being of the ducks themselves.
To answer the second part of the question, I would think of them like a chicken. If you're starting from scratch, I would get 4 or 5, and then one of them might die, and one of them might turn into a male if you're aiming for females. So I wouldn't go under 3 birds because they are a flock animal, and they're going to be a little nervous if you only have 1 or 2. So at least 3. When you're determining the breed of duck, I would think about like what purpose are you trying to fill? Do you want pets, eggs, meat, feathers, decoration, or do you want to show them? I remember I think I wrote a different article for Backyard Poultry about runner ducks. I listed that they can lay about 320 eggs a year. And a lot of people were commenting like, my runner ducks lay 20 eggs a year. My runner ducks lay 50 eggs a year. Well, The problem is, problem is where you're getting the breed stock from. So are you getting it from a pet catalog who are, where where people haven't been breeding them for egg production? Or are you getting them where the runner duck, for example, they're supposed to be standing like perfectly straight, like a perfect 90-degree angle, like they're kind of on the back of their heels all the way up? Or is your runner duck more horizontal, which means that, they're just kind of breeding willy-nilly. So my Pekin ducks, I think they're between 5 and 8 years old. I get an egg from each of them every day in spring and summer, and they're way out competing the chickens that are the same age. So you have to, but there's also 2 strains of Pekins. There's a meat Pekin and then an egg production Pekin. So do you want meat? Do you want eggs? I mean, I love the idea of people showing ducks. When I become rich and I retire, I want to only breed and raise Dutch hookbill ducks, which are a rare breed. And they're not part of the American Bantam Association or the American Poultry Association, because in order to do that, somebody has to show 50 of them, like the same color, like the same variety in one show. And then the judge has to score all of those. And that's how you get them into the standard. And most of the people who are raising them have 10 or 20. And then they can't keep up with the demand. So they'll hatch babe ducklings out, but then they'll ship them away. So you need to have 50 of one color in one city. And then you have to take them all to a show. And I think that would be so much fun.
That would be cool. I could definitely see you doing that. And I don't think it would take very long.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, before we take a break, I thought let's jump into a little bit about the practical planning and logistics for preparing for backyard ducks. So what should someone know about their environment, maybe their backyard, their neighborhood, before buying ducks? And should they have any sort of equipment on hand before the ducks even arrive?
It's going to be different if you want to start with ducklings or mature ducks. For ducklings, you'll need a brooder just like chickens or other backyard poultry. Ducks and ducklings, a lot of people say, are messier than chickens. And that's certainly true if they're in confinement. Once you start free ranging them, I find them to be less messy than a chicken, because the chickens are knocking down pots and creating those craters. For ducklings, you'll need a brooder. You have to keep them warm, same temperature as a chicken. The first week, maybe 90 to 95, and then you can drop it about 5 degrees every week until you're about 10 or 12 weeks out. For adult ducks and the babies, you definitely have to be cognizant of predators. I have lost a few ducks to raccoons, maybe a neighborhood dog, because they were on that ephemeral pond that I was talking about, and they were being stubborn and they wouldn't go in to the coop, right at dusk. So if they're a little too slow, predators can get them. So you have to protect them and make sure you have the adequate food. I only have female ducks, luckily, but yeah, so that was on purpose. And they just eat the same laying formula that my female chickens eat. Fresh supply of water. Because they bring the food into the waters to help them swallow, you might have to change their water more frequently. And then you can house them on kind of the same substrates as you would a chicken. But other than a structure, like a coop, I don't think there's other equipment that you would have to have.
Got it. Now, for someone who's really new to raising ducks, do you recommend that they start off the bat with starting at the duckling stage, or do you recommend they skip that stage and start raising ducks when they're a little older, if they have that option?
Another quote problem with ducks and geese is that it's a little more difficult to sex them as day old. If you really only want females, you should get teenagers that are, between 16 and 20 weeks old. But if you don't care if you have drakes or ducks, I think the duckling stage is great. I just adopted maybe a 6-month-old chicken that was found on a golf course. And it's only been about a week, but I'm having a little bit trouble getting her used to the flock, my existing flock. I was thinking about like, oh, this is the first time I've done this because all the other chickens I had as chicks, and then they kind of grew up with the older chickens. And if you start with older ducks, you have to like really train them to go into the coop at night and like befriend you. But if you have ducklings, they'll just imprint on you. They'll eat from your hand. They'll follow you, and they'll just know all of the steps and all of the things that you want them to do. So I think you might as well start with those cute fuzzy ducklings. And since this is being published after Easter, I do not feel any concern that people will be buying a little baby duckling as an Easter present, as like a throwaway present, because just like chickens, they live 8 to 12, 18, 8 to 14 years old.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Well, we're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsor. And when we return, we're going to dive deeper into how to care for backyard ducks and also address some challenges that may arise if you're living and raising ducks in urban and suburban settings. So we'll be right back.
Brinzy products are designed to be long-lasting and energy efficient. Their Advanced Series incubators and brooders feature the latest state-of-the-art digital control systems, providing instant readings of temperature and humidity to ensure successful hatches and healthy chicks. Check out Brinzy incubators and more at Brinzy, BRINSEA.com. And now back to our conversation with Kenny.
All right, we are back with Kenny. We're talking on how to raise urban and suburban ducks in your backyard. So we had a great discussion earlier about some of that preparation, why someone would want to raise ducks. And now we're going to jump a little more into the details of when you have the ducks, some different things that might arise. So before the break, we touched a little bit on general food, water, shelter, cleaning needs that you'll have to keep up with. Did you want to elaborate on any of that a bit more before we go into the next subject?
For the shelter, what I have is like a shed. Yeah. So for the past like 25 years, I've kind of had them in a shed where I put a plastic tarp down, and then I'll put maybe some layers of like newspaper, and then you can use, what I've done is shavings or straw, and then I'll clean that out on a weekly basis. Or you could do the deep litter method, just like chickens, or because they're free range, they're really just on mulch during the day, and they're only in their night quarters at night, so they keep it pretty clean. And every time I freshen their straw and hay, they make these cute little noises, and they're just so excited, and they dabble in there looking for little worms and little bugs. So shavings, hay, straw, you could use that, but you should not be using like a metal grid or a grate, or you shouldn't like be keeping them in a cage with a cage bottom because of their webbed feet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also really like how, just kind of like chickens, someone doesn't need to go out and get some big, elaborate, fancy type of shelter. You can really see what's already in your backyard, like a shed or something, and utilize that to save some money.
Growing up, for maybe my 6th or 7th grade birthday, when I was 12 or 13, I got a 12 by 8 foot shed. And then my dad installed, I think, 4 stalls that were each like 2 foot wide, 6 foot deep. Mm-hmm. And then we trained the runner ducks to go in one, the silver apple yards to go in another stall, the chickens to go in one, so they would all kind of put themselves to sleep. Yeah. And that was the same setup, a tarp with some straw or shavings in it. It was very easy.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's so great. Well, we also talked a little bit on egg production and what we can expect from ducks and how it depends on the breed. Maybe if we say compared to chickens, how prolific can ducks be in terms of laying, and what's kind of the range, versus, going from a duck that will give you a lot of eggs to a duck that if you do choose it, you're not really going to get like a ton of eggs and they would be around for another purpose.
The worst egg layers are going to be the ones that also lay tiny eggs, like the Australian spotted, the English call duck, the East Indy duck, and then the mallards. We kind of forgot about them, but like the grandparents of all the domestic ducks, people do raise mallards. And all of those are really seasonal. They'll lay in the spring and they'll lay between 25 and 50 eggs. So that's a very small amount compared to a chicken. And then the number one are definitely the Indian runner ducks. They can lay between 150 and 300 eggs, depending on the strain. So you got to talk to the breeders. It's going to be difficult if you're getting them from a generic catalog. And then Pekin ducks can also lay between like 125 and 225 eggs. And then some of those like heavier weighted ducks, like the Ruins, how do you say that? Ruin? R-O-U-E-N.
Rouen. Rowan?
Rowan. You're right. Just like those heavier ducks, the Rowans, they're so big, they only lay a couple dozen eggs a year.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a heavy weighted goose, except they're a duck. So they only lay maybe like 35 to 100 eggs. Muscovy ducks, maybe 50 to 125 eggs. But if you get like a light breed, which are considered the runner ducks and Campbells and magpies, they can be around 200 to 300.
Mm-hmm.
And
nice.
I don't know if we mentioned this in the other podcast about eggs, but I am currently eating 6 eggs a day. I've been doing it for about a year and a half. Some of the eggs are from the ducks, which are huge, rich. They're huge compared to the bird size. And then I also have like Polish chickens and, just a handful of backyard chickens. And their eggs are so much smaller. So
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine 6 eggs a day is like 4 large grocery store eggs a day, because the duck eggs are extra large and then my chickens are pretty small.
Yeah. Well, that's a good reference to have depending on, if someone wants to raise these ducks for eggs. And I actually had a thought going back to food for ducks. Can ducks be kind of used like with chickens if you have some kitchen scraps, things like that you want to give to the ducks? Maybe you want to kind of have the ducks be like a natural composter kind of thing, or just to give them scraps. Is that something that you've done? Are there types of foods that you would definitely tell people to stay away from?
For foods to avoid, I keep saying it's just like chickens because I'm assuming that people are more familiar with chickens. You want to avoid foods that are like fatty, alcoholic, salty, junk food, human junk food. Avoid that. Almost all vegetables and fruits that I can think of are safe for ducks. They also like to eat grains. I just fed some of them like 2 cups of barley that I found in someone's pantry that I thought was a little too old for human consumption, and they enjoyed that. They'll eat cereal grains. The smaller bantam breeds of ducks, they're excellent foragers. And then the Muscovy is also an excellent forager. The light breed ducks are excellent foragers. And then the medium and the heavy, generally speaking, are not that great at foraging. The ones when I say they're excellent, they can get 15 to 100% of their food just by foraging.
Wow.
So yeah, you can consider them like a kitchen garbage disposal, but in the yard or in a pond. I grow aquatic carnivorous plants, but on top of that, sometimes I get like duckweed and salvias. And when it becomes too thick, it's in a protected area, I remove all of it and I put it in the duck's kiddie pool or in the duck's ephemeral pond. And they just think it's a treat and they'll just eat all of it. They can also eat the invasive water hyacinth, invasive to Florida. It's from South America. So they like to eat aquatic vegetation and also your kitchen scraps.
That's great. Some challenges that could come up with backyard ducks are, like we had talked about before, some environmental factors just in the neighborhood or even in your own household. So one of the things I was thinking about was maybe you have some other pets like a dog that lives in your house, and naturally you would need to take the dog out to go to the bathroom or just to give it room to be out in the yard and stuff. If you have other pets like that, are there some recommendations that you would want to give as to how to work around that and make sure that household pets wouldn't clash, or even young kids in your household and stuff, just knowing that they might potentially not know how to interact around ducks?
Yeah, ducks are more shy than a chicken. If you want them to be producing high quality meat and a lot of eggs, you want to keep them calm and tranquil, allowing them to escape or, recede into the water to protect themselves would be a nice benefit. But if you're like truly in an urban situation, you want to be sure that they can maybe even have like a visual barrier to a semi-aggressive or scary looking dog until they get used to it. If you're starting with ducklings, they might just start sleeping on the dog and, just think it's their mother and befriend it. So you have to know your pet and your children. I never pick up my chickens or my ducks, and then they'll be around my feet. And if I need to pick them up, I just bend over and pick them up. On the opposite side, my neighbor, who's been raising the goose and the chickens for like 40 years, every day she like grabs them, picks them up, snuggles them, holds them. But every time she reaches for one, they all go running because they're not really into it. So when she comes over to my house, she's always so surprised how easy it is to pick up the chickens or the ducks. And that's because I'm not chasing them and I'm not picking them up. So they're not a pet, they're not a fluffy cat dog pet. I think of them as like beautiful ornaments in my backyard. And 2 of my Pekin ducks I got because I was on like Craigslist or Facebook many, many years ago, and I was looking for female ducks. And a couple messaged me and they said, hey, we have 2 like 10-month-old female Pekin ducks. They lay eggs every day and we would like to gift them to you. And I said, great. So they came over with these beautiful female Pekin ducks, full grown. They were very docile. They were very friendly. And this couple had bought them for a Valentine's Day present as ducklings. And they had them living in their apartment bathroom for the past like 8 to 9 months. And when ducks go to the bathroom, it's explosive and messy. And I could not imagine giving up an indoor room to they're 12, 14-pound birds.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm glad that they have a forever home here where they can forage. These ducks also had never gotten dirty before.
Wow.
But they enjoyed the muck and the mud and the chickens. And yeah, so don't think of them as an indoor pet. Just like I think this was only 5 years ago or 7 years ago, but they even referenced the TV show Friends, where
yes.
Joey and Chandler had a Pekin duck and some type of chicken in their apartment. And it's like, yeah, that was not realistic. When I was working at the zoo, we would say like ducks or chickens, they would go to the bathroom every like 10 minutes, every 20 minutes. That might be an exaggeration, but it's close to that. They do go to the bathroom a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely not an indoor type of pet. Well, we also talked a bit on knowing the types of threats, other threats in the environment, like local predators, or even just knowing your weather before you get ducks. Are there any other types of precautions that you would want to recommend? And one of the other things I was thinking of in terms of protecting your ducks is, especially maybe in a suburban neighborhood or something like that, there could be a chance that the grass or anything around it could be treated with some sort of chemicals. And I was curious if you've run into those instances where you need to keep an eye out for that to protect ducks.
Yeah, I would definitely avoid feeding them grasses or foodstuffs that have been sprayed by herbicides or pesticides. Both my neighbor and I, who I keep referencing, we both have an acre, and she gets those 10-20 trays. They're for like greenhouses where you can put like 18 3-inch pots in there. And because both of us both of our acres are all mulch. So because she wants to give her chickens and her goose and the ducks greenery, she gets the 10-20 trays and she seeds them with like ryegrass or barley or, grasses or grains that are good for ducks and chickens. And then she'll put a 1 inch by 1 inch grate over those feed over the 10-20 greenhouse trays. She'll grow them up to like 10 inches or maybe even 5 inches. And then she'll offer the birds the trays. And because there's a grate on top of it, they can't dig into it. And this really works well for the geese and the ducks. The chickens are so destructive, they just pulled the whole plant out from the roots. Or if you have time and you only have a couple of birds, you could easily just take scissors, trim the greenery, and then give them as like a little treat.
Well, we touched on, I had a question here about neighbors posing a challenge. I think we've kind of covered that earlier in the episode. So my final question is, if ducks live in your backyard, we talked a little bit how they won't tear up the ground as much as chickens do for dust baths and such. But are there any other ways that they may alter the landscape in both beneficial and maybe unexpected ways?
I was definitely thinking about the beneficial ways. They're going to be fertilizing your yard by foraging around it and then going to the bathroom. If it's really rainy or wet where you live, they'll be dabbling and they'll just be looking for little slugs and insects in it. But yeah, in my experience, they're very, very gentle in the landscape. And I would encourage you to add a few to your backyard.
Well, are there any other points that I may not have touched on in my questions that you wanted to share with our listeners before we wrapped up?
Just like chickens, there are rare heritage breeds of ducks. And if you're going to order some ducklings or even adult ducks online, you might want to take a moment and think about those rare ducks. You can go to the Livestock Conservancy and see which breeds are threatened or endangered and which ones really need your help. Because a lot of these heritage breeds, like the Dutch hookbill, their egg production, their foraging ability, their meat is just as good as the ducks that are commonly found. And if we have more people raising them, sharing information about them, showing them, then we can help save those rare breeds. And we want to save them because they have nice genetic potential, and we don't want to lose those genes out to the common duck.
No offense to the common duck, but we like this. We like our diversity of duck breeds.
Yeah, because some of them are more heat tolerant. Some of them are better foragers. Some of them lay eggs on less food. So they have a better ratio of, food to meat or food to eggs. So we want to be promoting those things.
And more possibilities for people who have limited space. They live in cities and suburbs. There could be some heritage breeds that just work really well for you in that situation.
And resources, I was mentioning, if you go to the Livestock Conservancy, you can see the breeds that are listed that need help. But the better tool is when you go to that website, you can search by state to see who is breeding those birds. And then you can reach out directly.
Are there any other resources that you want to share for people who want to learn more about backyard ducks?
Story's Guide to Raising Ducks by Dave Holderried is kind of the Bible. The edition that I have is from 2001. There might be one more updated edition. And sadly, him and his wife, Millie, just retired from the duck and geese business a few years ago. But he sent specific breeds to different people around Canada and North America. So those breeds are still out there, but that is such a thorough reference. And then, of course, Backyard Poultry Magazine, a sister of Mother Earth News. I've been writing for about 10 years, and we have lots of duck and geese and quail and pheasant articles in there.
Absolutely. And we'll plug all of those in our show notes so listeners can check them out. And where can people connect with you or just learn more about you and what you do?
My Facebook and Instagram are Critter Companions by Kenny Coogan. And it's mostly about carnivorous plants. But every once in a while, I will share pictures of my fancy chickens and my pet ducks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kenny, for being on with us. This was such a great conversation, and I learned so much about backyard ducks.
Thank you so much.
We thank you, the listener, for joining our podcast and encourage you to share it with your friends, colleagues, and family. To listen to more podcasts and to learn more, visit our website at www.motherearthnews.com/podcast. And remember, no matter how brown your thumb is, you can always cultivate kindness.
You've just listened to our episode about raising backyard ducks in urban and suburban spaces. You can reach us at letters@motherearthnews.com with any comments or suggestions. Our podcast production team includes Carla Tillman, Jessica Mitchell, John Moore, and Kenny Coogan. Music for this episode is Travel Light by Jason Shaw. This Mother Earth News and Friends podcast is a production of Ogden Publications. Learn more about us at motherearthnews.com. Thanks again to Brinzy, our sponsor for this Mother Earth News and Friends podcast. You too can experience the Brinzy difference and maximize your hatch rates with Brinzy incubators that precisely monitor temperature and humidity and are made of antimicrobial materials. Brinzy ships worldwide and provides stellar customer support to answer all your questions. Hatch your chicks with Brinzy, the leader in innovative incubation research. Learn more at brinsea.com. Until next time, don't forget to love your mother.